Now more than ever, your church website is kind of the most important first step for anybody that's considering coming through your doors. While it's not maybe what we're doing on the day-to-day basis, which is the most important thing, it is going to get those people through the doors to be comfortable to walk in on a Sunday morning.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Church Circle podcast, and we're so excited to be back with you for another episode. And this season, we've been kind of diving into passions, what people have been interested in, what they feel like God's placed on their heart. And one of the things we didn't want to do this season is leave some of the practical things. It's good to be inspired, but we also want to leave you equipped and hit with some practical steps. And one of the things we always get asked, whether it's on Church Circle, whether it's on our Instagram, whether it's through the Church Media Squad, is about websites, church websites specifically. And this has been one of those things I'm like, we definitely need to do an episode about this on the podcast. And so when we were kind of putting together the plan for this season, I was like, let's have a dedicated website episode where we talk about some of the most important things of your church website, some common kind of false flags or whatever it is that people fall into, and the traps that people fall into with websites, but also some of the things that you can do to your church website today to make a huge improvement. And as we were planning, this name kept appearing, and her name is Emily Ament, and she is the web director at the squad. And so I was like, let's get Emily on the podcast. So Emily, thanks for joining us. Welcome. And it's so great to have you here. Maybe just share a little bit about who you are and what's brought you to this point as the web director of the squad.
Yeah, so excited to be here, talk about websites today. They truly are my passion, a professional and personal way. And so just kind of really excited to be here. And so I guess to give a little bit of a background, I have grown up in central Pennsylvania, went to school for graphic design, and I really fell in love with websites and digital media. And I began working at a web marketing agency in the East Coast regional area and got a lot of great practical education. And then from there, I had my first daughter, Francesca, and kind of took a little bit of time off there raising her, and felt as I was doing that God was really calling me to kind of get into the church space. As I feel like there's a huge need for just some beautiful and also functional websites within the church sphere too. And so I went into that role as a UI UX designer, and then was able to kind of learn even more about the user experience side of websites, and then specialize in that to a great degree. And then from there was reach out with an opportunity to work at Church Media Squad. I came on as a web designer, and then shortly after assumed the web director position there, and have just really been loving helping churches build both beautiful but also functional and relatable websites.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great resume. You've kind of done a little bit of everything. So you've worked for a church, you've worked for a design or creative agency that works with churches, you've worked for an agency that's kind of secular, and you've obviously studied for this as well. So you've kind of had your experiences very well rounded in every area. So I'm going to be learning a lot today. Web design is definitely not one of my passions. It's one of the things I struggle with the most. I feel like it's such a vast world of, like you said, like it's UI, there's UX, then there's back end, and then there's kind of even just CMS and all that kind of stuff, and just all the different things that require our attention. I think sometimes this is what can confuse people, especially the one church staff member that's responsible for updating their website. Like that, you can't do everything, you can't learn everything. So we have to kind of like find out what works for us. And so I'm really excited to have that conversation with you today. We're going to cover the why, the how, the people, the side of things, the strategy, and looking at the future. But let's start with the why. So why do you think that websites are still important for churches today, especially in this kind of world of social media? Most people are posting their service times or their events onto their Instagram page. And most people will find out about church now through Google My Business or through through social media. So how important is church websites still, and what relevance do they have in this time?
Oh man, yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's so important that people should realize that now more than ever, your church website is kind of the most important first step for anybody that's considering coming through your doors. And so sometimes it's really hard to envision when you're on the ground inside your church, like the importance of what your digital presence is, because what you're doing every week on those Sunday mornings and throughout the week is so important. You're seeing people, you're connecting with them. But what you don't see on the other side of that are the vast amount of people that are living in your area that don't know who you are as a church and who are trying to build a relational equity with you before they even walk through your doors. So we talk a lot about relational equity in UX and these trust indicators. And essentially what that means is that there's actually a lot of data around the idea that everybody who is coming to or investing either their money or their time or any sort of personal relevance into a physical location is going to build a level of trust within that location before they ever walk through the door. And how we do that is through building trust within them to be sure that what they're walking into is accurate and also safe. And so essentially what your website needs to do for those people when they're trying to find where they want to go is communicate effectively who you are, that you are relevant, and then also that they're walking into a safe environment. And so when you kind of put your website on the back burner as a church, what you're communicating to those new users or those new visitors is, I'm not sure if I can trust this place to guide me well, to lead me well. I don't know if what I'm walking into is a safe environment. And so really what we need to kind of understand is that while it's not maybe what we're doing on the day-to-day basis, which is the most important thing, it is going to get those people through the doors to be comfortable to walk in on a Sunday morning. And so that's really kind of, I think, the thing that's really hard to conceptualize when you're not in it. But there's just so much data to back up those touch points.
Yeah, that's a great point. I kind of think of it like this. Someone said to me, this is a very millennial thing to do. So maybe I'm showing my age, even though technically, and I've said this before on the podcast, I'm Gen Z, but I'm born in 97. So I'm kind of on the fence. But one of the most
Yes.
millennial things that people say you do is that when you get your laptop out to make serious purchases. And so, like, I think like when I'm booking airline tickets, I never book them on a phone. I don't know how people can do that. I have to get my laptop out. I have like 10 different tabs of all the different, I've got Expedia open, I've got Google Flights open, and I'm comparing everything, but I'm doing something seriously. So I have to do it on my laptop. And I feel like church websites, I kind of like what you're saying is with information and wanting to understand and build trust and find out if this church is a good place to visit, if it's a safe place to be, it's a serious decision. It's something that people are being vulnerable about and wanting to explore. And so Instagram, okay, it's cool for the attention grab. It's cool for the little piece of information. But when you need to find out about, are your kids going to be safe in kids' church? What kind of programs there are? What should I expect when I turn up to church on a Sunday? You know, what does the room look like? You know, are there any further explanations about who the pastors are or the team? Like all these places, all these things, really the best place to find that information out is a website. It's a centralized location of that information. And you could kind of get that by scrolling through Instagram, but you're going to have to do a lot of fact finding and piecing stuff together. Whereas a website has all the information. When you're making that serious decision, like I am as a millennial with my laptop and buying flights, that kind of thing, it's like you want to be invested. You want to know exactly what information you need before you make that decision to go there. So yeah, that's a great point. What do you think is the biggest challenge or one of the biggest missed opportunities for churches when they're making their websites right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple really key things. And so you kind of touched on it a bit. Google My Business is kind of number one for me. When you go on vacation and you're looking for some place to eat, there's going to be a lot of really great Chinese restaurants around you or Mexican restaurants or burger places that are really well known in their area for those specific things. But you don't know who they are. Like you've no idea how to search for them by name. And so very rarely as somebody who's new to the area and then also new to kind of the ins and outs of what's happening, are you going to search for a place and then vet it by name? What you're going to do is say, well, what is the best Mexican restaurant near me if that's the food that I really want? And then Google is going to populate information for you that you're then going to vet from based off of what you've searched. And so really what we first need to do is make sure that Google knows that you are a good, valid resource for what people are searching for in your area. And that's going to be church near me, non-denominational church near me, Catholic church near me, anything like that. And so really optimizing that Google business profile to make sure that Google understands who you are as a church, knows that you are a valid, positive resource for new users, and then is able to kind of vet your website and then push you to the top is going to be really like the number one thing that you should be doing. And it's so easy. Once you get it set up, once you kind of understand the process, it's very easy then for Google to utilize that and point people to your website. So I'd say number one, just utilizing that free resource, making sure it's working appropriately. But then when you're looking at your actual website, I see this all of the time. We talk about it. It's called a hierarchy of needs in UX. And so at the basis, and something that oftentimes people will forget, is that we need the website to be functional and reliable. And so it can be beautiful. It can have all the bells and whistles. But if what you're posting on your website or what you're not upkeeping on your website isn't relevant to your church. So if you have buttons on your website that aren't working, or you have events that are weeks or months old, you're not creating a safe space for users to come and really get accurate information. And so that's a first ding for like, hey, I just can't trust that these people are who they say they are, because they're posting Easter sermons for last year, or events from a summer event for at the movies that were not, like, it's Christmas time. Like, what's happening here? And so I would say the best thing that you can do if you're overwhelmed and you don't have kind of a lot of time to invest is scale back to what's most important. Talk about who you are as a church, what you offer, what people can expect, and then get your service times out there. And then make sure that that information is relevant and consistent. Don't overdo it in the beginning because you want all of the bells and whistles, but then burn out and then not be able to upkeep that, which we see kind of often because it's really hard to upkeep an in-depth website.
Yeah, that's great. That actually leads me to my next question, which I'll ask in a second. But that's such a good point, because I think that's something I've noticed. Is like I have messages about this quite a lot, and people are like, "I'm just feeling overwhelmed by the amount of stuff I have to update." And it's like, actually, if we can just select the information that you think people are asking, the questions that people are asking, and then we can utilize those tools like Instagram and Google Business. Like, we can do those to kind of help push the review side of things, or they can also build trust. And if you can have your website just present the information that's necessary, and then that requires less updating. I think, like, you're right. The big things are, okay, what to expect on a Sunday, who the team are, service times, and
Yes.
just those kind of big ones. Those are the things, and even just like location, address. I mean, you'll find that on Google Business, but like some of the really simple stuff. And it's like, okay, then we can start to look at those other things and add them in as we go. Whether it's, I know a lot of people put up their calendars on there and like have them like connected to Church Suite and stuff. But I think really, like, just starting at the core basics. And I guess you asking yourself the question, whoever's listening right now, is, does my website do the core things well? And if the answer is yes, then you can kind of move forward on building extra things. But if your answer is no, then okay, let's scale back, focus on the things that work, and get those to work well, and then start to add them in. I guess my question is, and maybe we can kind of even look further into this, is what are the core elements that every church website needs? And that's regardless of size or budget. Maybe we can like actually list the name of the pages so people can like make a note of those things.
Yeah, totally. Well, first and foremost, you need a homepage, obviously, and that homepage really should consist of introducing basically who you are as a church. So you're going to really want to put just photos of your community. I actually see that a lot. We don't put enough just images of what we're doing on a Sunday. And if you visualize your church website as the first introduction that somebody has to your church in a digital space, it should represent who your church is when they walk through those doors. Best thing you can do is throw up some photos for that. Second, you need to have times and locations. So people need to know how to find you or how to contact you. So throw up your phone number, throw up your email, throw up where you are located, and then how people can interact with you. So if that's a Sunday morning service, make sure to put your times up there. Make sure they're accurate, where people need to park, anything like that. Just eliminate any hurdle, any mental hurdle that a user would need to get to your door on a Sunday if they're looking to figure out where you are and what you're doing on a Sunday morning. Really, the most important thing outside of that is like a plan a visit and a who we are page. So if you're thinking in terms of new users, which is usually the number one thing we're doing with a website, it's the best way to get new users through your door. I would love for people to think about their website in relation to what they would be thinking about if they were planning a huge vacation. And so if I'm planning a huge vacation at a resort in Mexico or Hawaii, what am I thinking of before I book that? I want to know where I'm staying, what that looks like, what services are provided, when I need to show up. And I'm vetting through a very specific process, and people are doing that with your church space. And so really try to put yourself in the seat of a new person walking through your door. You talk to a lot of new people every Sunday. And so what are the questions that they're asking? What are they unsure about? That's really what the plan a visit and the kind of who we are, our beliefs pages are really all about. And so plan a visit pages really should consist of what does a Sunday morning service look like? So, do you have contemporary worship? Do you have coffee at the door? What can somebody expect when they're walking through their doors so that they're comfortable and understanding of what that environment's looking like? What do your sermons sound like? Who is your pastor? Things like that. And then that third page that I was talking about is just your beliefs, your belief system. So denominations, things like that. What are your core foundational beliefs as a church? What guides you in your ministry? That's really important for people when they're thinking about who they want to invest in to help guide them in their Christian faith. And so making it really easy for people to understand what you do and what the purpose of what your church is. Those are like going to be the three most important pages for your church as a whole. And then we can really get into talk about like updating sermons and events and things like that. But those are really secondary to making sure that people understand who you are as a church and what they can expect when they walk through the doors on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And then again, that's what, like, you know, especially in the world of like AI and ChatGPT and stuff, that information is being pulled from by ChatGPT and stuff. So if you're not, you know, they're not going to go, ChatGPT is not going to go onto your Instagram to find out service times. It's going to go onto your website, and Google Business is going to have that information there that ChatGPT is going to pull from as well. So as we get more into this kind of AI side of things, your website, even if people don't click on your website, what other companies and what other resources pull from is going to be your website. So the information needs to be on there because it's going to get pulled from even if people don't visit your website as well. So just think of it as like a bank of your information. And again, this goes back to it doesn't need to be, you know, aesthetically pleasing is secondary to making sure it actually works and there's form to it. But then obviously it needs to look nice. It will be helpful. But I think having the information there is critical. One thing I would say as well, and this is someone's asked me this before about how do I know what a first time guest should expect when I go to the church all the time, is there's two things I think you can do. You can either go and visit someone else's church and make a list of all the things that you didn't know as you were going through. So like, I didn't know where to park. I didn't know which entrance to go through. I didn't know how to get into the lobby. I didn't know what to expect. Make a list of those things and compare it to your church website right now. And if there's gaps, use that to answer those questions, or get a secret shopper to like one of your friends who's never been to your church before, get them to come to a church service for the first time. The reason I say a secret shopper is because you don't want the welcome team, the car park team, the pastoral team, you don't want them to know who you are. So you can't really do this because you know where everything is, you know people there. You want someone to come for the first time, and as they're going through, make a note of, or they make a note of what they're missing, information they're missing, things that went well, and then you can use that as a reference to update your site. I remember I used to work at a church a few years ago, and I went to get coffee one morning, maybe just before the service started. And I came back in as a guest almost, because I was just coming back to the main auditorium. And I walked back through like a normal person would on a Sunday. I was like, I've just realized how many things are missing. And that was like, okay, that for me was a light bulb moment of like, now I know what it feels like to be a new person. And these are the things I'm going to implement differently. So if you're struggling with that plan your visit page, which I think is really important, try visiting another church and seeing what your experience is like and compare that to your site, or bring someone in and get them to do a secret shop on your own church. I think that's more fun because then you can like get the information back afterwards. But and you can then present that to leadership as well, and they can kind of see what a general new person's experience is like.
Yeah. A third thing too that we do actually often, I try to do this all the time, is look like digitally, like search for a church in the same way that we've kind of been talking to you about how we search for restaurants or flights or things like that. And so even if it's like a town over, really get into the mindset of, okay, I'm looking for a brand new church. And I'm just going to vet by church near me or church in X area. See what Google throws out, and then look at each website and really vet it for what information is relevant to me? What do I need to know before I'm going to walk through those doors? It's really, really easy to be a critic than like a creator. And so make sure that you're continually kind of just putting yourself in that new user seat or new visitor seat, even if it is just going to that next town over and then vetting all of those church websites and saying, hey, they're missing, like, I don't know how to get through their doors on a Sunday morning service, or I don't really know what their worship sounds like, or I don't actually even know what they're going to preach to me. And so stuff like that too.
Yeah, it's actually quite an easy thing to do. I guess you just have to find the time to go and do it. But I would say the time you spend on that side of things is going to really help you in saving time elsewhere, because you're not guessing. You've got a list of things and you can just get on with it. With that in mind, how can churches And I guess because we talk about those three core pages, right? One of them being the homepage. How can churches think differently about their homepage? And what's the first thing that visitors should see or feel?
Yeah, they should 100% have a really strong understanding of what it's like to walk through your doors on a Sunday morning service as soon as they hit your homepage. And so, if that is, we haven't been talking about this a whole lot, but if that's really relevant branding and design, that's kind of like what we do at our core when we're talking about a really high level website. And so, it should be branded and designed in a way that is 100% accurate to your identity as a church, so that people have a really strong understanding visually of what they're walking into. And that can be sometimes really hard indicator to understand if you don't live in the design world all the time. Like, yes, we want it to be beautiful, but we want all of this information there. And it's actually a huge data point that when something's visually pleasing, aesthetically pleasing, has a strong brand, there is an immediate level of trust that somebody can understand in where they're walking into, because they have a better understanding of that physical location. And so making sure that it to some degree looks visually pleasing and looks accurate to the brand of your church, whether that's the logo, the colors, things like that. But then also, I talked about this a little bit in the past, but making sure that there's relevant photos so people can see what walking through the doors looks like. People can see what their kids are going to be interacting with. Maybe it's worship services or Sunday morning services. Like, picture really is worth 1,000 words in this case scenario. And it's really, really easy to add photos to your homepage that can speak to the community and culture of your church. And then from the information standpoint, again, we've talked about this a lot, but just making sure that your service times and locations are prevalent, that information is prevalent. And then your core just mission and vision as a church is just on there. So it might be, hey, welcome to X Church. We are driven by this, and we can't wait to meet you this Sunday. So it's not difficult to kind of get that kind of mission and vision. You should already have that, but making sure that we're being really intentional about getting that on that homepage is really important. And then secondary to that, yeah, just making sure that any relevant information that a user might need to understand, they can kind of walk through that journey. And so we talk about the plan a visit page and the what we believe page. Throw a section on your homepage that leads people to that, so it's easy for them to find those things.
Is your church's branding falling flat or feeling disconnected? It's time to level up with Church Media Squad's Branding Squad. They'll dive deep into your church's unique DNA to craft a brand that truly represents your mission and resonates with your community. From eye-catching logos to cohesive color palettes, they'll create a visual identity that sets your church apart and attracts more people to the gospel. Ready to transform your church's branding and make a lasting impact? Head to churchmediasquad.com/branding. When you say Google Business, it's when you go onto the Google Maps or you go onto Google and you see that top card right at the top, and it gives you like a list of 3 or 5 places. It shows a map next to it. It says like when they're open and what's available. It just a little kind of like box before you get to the search results. When you go onto Google Maps as the app, you'll see them as like a list of things with their reviews and stuff. Now, one of the most important things of that is pictures, because it kind of gives you a glimpse into what it looks like on a Sunday. And one thing I've said to people a lot before is, if you're taking pictures during the week of an empty room and an empty parking lot, it's not going to look reflective of how it feels on a Sunday. And so people are going to look at that. It's the same with like you said, like a Mexican restaurant, and I see it empty in the photos, I'm going to assume that no one likes it, so no one's there. You have to have photos of what it actually looks and feels like, and has an actual representation of what a Sunday is. And so on Sunday, like, even this is a great opportunity this time of year. I mean, we're post Easter. There's a lot more people coming to services. Like, use this as a time, whether it's an event or something, use this as a time to get pictures where it feels the most vibrant, because you can use that throughout the year. And it is an accurate reflection of your church. It does happen, but there are weeks when sometimes it's a bit quieter, or you're doing it during in the midweek. Don't use those times. Use it when it feels the most vibrant, because that's going to reflect really well on the homepage, on Google Business, and it's going to give you, kind of an accurate representation online, especially when there's so many other churches to look at as well. I think having some photos that really stand out and represent your church well, it might only be 5 photos. Well, those 5 photos you've got to make the most of. So yeah, I would say that's pretty important as well.
100%.
Okay, so what tips do you have for churches with no in-house designer or web team? So we're talking about that one church communicator, the person that's wearing 10 hats. What can they do right now to update their website to keep things fresh?
Yeah. we talked about this a little bit before, but I guess there would be different tiers to that, right? And a lot of that's going to be time investment, financial investment, things like that. So at the very basis, I would say just comb through your website and get rid of anything that's not accurate or relevant to what you're currently doing. So if you have that broken button, remove it. Don't even worry about replacing it right now. Just get it off. So simplify as much as you can. If you're kind of in the red zone, everything's on fire, and you don't have any financial or time investment to be able to put towards this. Just scale it back, live in it for a little bit, and then kind of set some time aside later to really work on kind of taking it to the next level. If there is the ability, either financially or with a time investment kind of aspect of it, that was when I would kind of look into either auditing and then adding as you can, either yourself or B, outsourcing. And when I talk about outsourcing, I'm not always talking about outsourcing to an agency or something like at a high level cost, but then also outsourcing to plugins or something that's going to make your life easier. So we talk about church planning and PCO and things like that. There's a lot of really great integrations for websites that makes it hands off for you. And so I don't think oftentimes people understand that. There's like an initial setup for maybe a plugin or a service or something that you could purchase on at one time or on a month-to-month basis for a low cost. That means that every time that you upload an event to Planning Center, it automatically uploads to your website. Like you don't have to press a button, you don't have to do anything extra. And so those are really like what are going to capitalize your time down the road. And then if you do kind of like find that your website is really lacking, you're not kind of getting people through the door in the way that you want to, and you do have kind of like maybe a little bit more financially to invest in that kind of payoff down the road, then that's when you'd want to outsource to an agency or somebody like that who can help kind of put a professional level of information and understanding into how to really optimize your website for all those different points we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I think like you said it as well, like you can get help on this from quite an early start. It doesn't have to all be on you. And I think one of the great ways to get help is get a volunteer if you can. Like find someone in the church, even if it's just to update stuff once a week, even if it's just to do with like uploading sermons and stuff like that. Like I think the benefit of us being a very web-driven culture and a very online-driven culture is that most people have now had an experience with building some kind or updating some kind of website. They may not be perfect at it, but like even with the Gen Xers and above have had some experience of doing something on the not the back end, but like whether it's they have experience on WordPress or Squarespace or whatever it is. There's so many things now that or so many platforms and stuff like that people have got experience with. And I think you can start to expect people in your church to be able to like help out on those things. And if you're a communicator juggling lots of different things, then maybe one of those smaller things you're juggling right now can be given to a volunteer, and it could be weekly updates of a website, or just making sure that, like you said, like going through and testing it. Okay, well, if you're struggling to be on top of this, go and give it to someone else who can test every button on the website, and they might have fresh eyes and come back to it, be like, hey, this isn't working. Then you can go and make the edit. So just try and get other people involved as much as possible. It's going to help, one, hopefully save you time in the long run, but also just to get a fresh set of eyes on it, so that you're not just sitting there looking at it the whole time thinking, I need to update this, I need to update this.
Yeah.
Get someone else to tell you that.
100%. And it's so easy, right? Like you don't need any technical experience to pop around a website and write down a list on a notepad of, I don't understand this, or this didn't work for me. And so, yeah, enlist help as much as you can.
Yeah. And this is, I think, this second question, I think, is important. We're getting close to time, but I think maybe we can just kind of stretch into this a little bit more, because these are some of the words that I think stop people in their tracks and make people feel a bit stuck when it comes to web design and web building. There's things like SEO, mobile optimization, accessibility. Like these are all quite big words that everyone talks about when it comes to web development. So can we break down those terms and maybe just talk about how people can use that in their everyday to like make a website better? So SEO, mobile optimization, and accessibility. I feel like those are the three things that are often like, okay, what is this? Especially for that kind of generation that don't really know what this is.
Yeah. You can definitely split this up into kind of like three parts. And so the first part, SEO, what that stands for is search engine optimization. And it's just a fancy term for the algorithm that Google uses to evaluate whether or not your website is relevant for the keywords that people are searching. We talk about keywords. What that means is essentially when someone types church near me or church in, I'm near Harrisburg, so church in Harrisburg, PA, or non-denominational church near me, every search term that I just listed is what we would call a keyword. And so there are keywords in your area and pertaining to your specific church that are kind of these like really great words that you want to be utilizing throughout your website to kind of help Google understand, hey, this is a church that fits with these people who are searching for these things. And so it can become a very advanced kind of science and data point. But at its core, what it really means is that you just want to keep your information clean. You want to give detailed information when you can and make sure that your website is functioning. So Google is going to look at your website both for the content that you're putting out, so those kind of rich paragraphs about your beliefs, your plan of visit page, those things that we've talked about. It's just going to read that data and see if that data correlates to what those people are searching for. So that's the content side of it. But then on the just optimization for website side of it, it's going to also look at, is your page breaking? So when you get onto when you type in your website, can people view your page, or is there some sort of code that's going out of whack? Or is that button working? Is it linking anywhere? Are people frustrated because they can't click on this? And so if you're following the very basic principles that we've outlaid on this podcast, at the very basic understanding of SEO, you will be winning in that category. And so it can get way more advanced, but really right now, it's not something to be afraid of. It's just making sure that what you have on your website, the content, is authentic to your church and that it's working and it's functioning appropriately. So that's really what SEO is. And then when we kind of talk about mobile optimization, what that means is just check your website on your mobile phone, because I think it's close to like 80 to 90% of all viewers are viewing on a mobile device now. And when we're looking at something really in depth, like what you were saying when you're talking about flights, we're looking at it on our computers. But when somebody's just glancing at a church near me on their phone, like that's going to be where they're looking at it. And that's what a lot of young users are doing. And so what we want to make sure is that that content is appropriately displayed on your mobile phone as well. And so just making sure that whatever you're building on a desktop, when you're looking at it on your phone, it's also easy to understand, it's appropriate, a button's not flying off the side of the screen, anything like that. And usually if you're using a content management system like Squarespace or a template or something like that, it's already going to be mobile optimized for you. There's going to be very little that you need to do. And if you do need to do something, it's going to be really easy. And so that's what we're talking about with mobile optimization. And then that third one,
accessibility.
Accessibility, yes. Okay. And so this is a huge one that I think sometimes people miss, and that's really just making sure that your content is easily accessible for both like the general population. So that's like bucket number one, but then also people who are maybe visually impaired, things like that, that we're hitting a set of standards that Google has placed for what we call ADA compliant. And so we're making sure that it's functioning appropriately for those users. That is less impactful if you're that kind of tiny church with that one single in-house agent, when we're talking about compliance kind of for the people who are impaired. But more so what we want to make sure is that accessibility for the users, the general population, is functioning appropriately. And so oftentimes what I see with this is people will throw up bright green buttons with red text on it and you can't read it. And that falls under the category of accessibility. So just make sure that when you're trying to make your website look really beautiful and amazing, that people can first and foremost read it. They can understand it. It's legible. That's the most important thing, because if somebody's getting frustrated, it doesn't matter how visually beautiful it looks. They're not going to be able to get to the content that they need. So it's not usable. So we're talking about accessibility in its basic form. We're talking about that. And then when we kind of get into this like next tier, it's really then we can kind of start to make sure that things are functioning appropriately for the people who need to hear your website, or maybe it's multilingual. So things like that. And that also is kind of like that next stage of the website experience that we can get into once everything is kind of working for the majority of the population.
Yeah, that's great. And I think those are like the three like buzzwords I hear so often. And I think it's quite confusing, even just for me, like to know that accessibility like is such a common word in web space, but actually in terms of where it sits in the hierarchy of changes, the things you should make, it's more kind of towards the end of the project, or things you kind of tighten up and finesse. I think hopefully that helps the listener as well. If you're listening and you're like, okay, now I understand what these words mean. I would say as well, if you are a creative at heart and you want to make everything beautiful, I would say focus on the Instagram or the Facebook or whatever it is. Like that could be your creative outlet. And then it gets buried in 10 days time. The post is not going to be anywhere anyway. It's going to be like buried in the timeline. Whereas websites, they're kind of built to last, and you want to be, people update their websites, but you want that information to be on there. And again, this is what like Google looks at and ChatGPT and stuff, is they're using data that's been in the archives as well. So whenever your information goes out on a website, you make updates, it's going to go into some log somewhere. And it's, if you keep updating it and changing it and making all these different things, it's going to hinder your, and correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, but it's going to hinder like kind of how it gets put into this database of, like, we're talking about Google and stuff. So
Yeah.
you kind of want to be decisive when you make changes, and you want to do it in a way that kind of is going to be a bit more longer standing than a social media post. So just try to kind of think about them as two separate things. Like if you want to be creative and go really crazy, maybe website isn't the place to do that, because it's got to tick a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
Whereas use your social media to be the creative expression. And then when you go back to the website, like Emily said, it's like, okay, this is the brand of the church. This is what the church looks like. And the information is easily accessible. Does that sound right? I don't want to act like I'm an expert when it comes to web design, because I have no clue what I'm talking about, but that's kind of what I envision. I'm telling myself that.
Yeah, no, and specifically when we talk about SEO, it kind of Google takes a bit to adjust when we update things iteratively. And so if we're making really great progress in SEO, and then we're updating things weekly, Google will just get confused. It'll say, hey, I don't really actually understand if this content is relevant for this person, because it's changing all the time. So that trust indicator for Google is now even questioning. So you're 100% right. If we're changing things all of the time that aren't supposed to be changed. So like, we're not talking about the sermons page. We're not talking about the events page. Google understands and really loves when we update those things, because we're using a specific type of marker for that. But when we're talking about our core pages of who we are and what we're doing, you're kind of going to hinder your ability to get to those top spots, because you're not staying consistent in what you're communicating and how you're communicating it. So you're 100% correct in that. And I would also emulate what you were saying. Like, if you do want to be really creative and you want to test something, social media is a great place to do that, because it's so come and go. It's really easy for you to try something and see if it hits. And then if it does hit consistently over the next 6, 8, 10 months, then we can kind of start to talk about how do we implement this over time in a really like foundational way to the website. But first, we want to make sure the website's functional and usable and legible for people.
Yeah, and that kind of goes for things like Easter service times, Christmas service times and stuff. Like I wouldn't go onto Google and switch out the service times or the time you're open on a Sunday.
Don't do that.
But just for that one Sunday, because that's just going to confuse everything. What I would do is have a separate, whether it's a ticker at the top of the page, or whether it's like a pop-up, or whether it's like a dedicated Easter page with the information for that specific service. If it's a long-term change, then update everything. Like we moved building, we built a new building, our church last year, and we moved last year, and we updated the address. And still, when you go onto Apple Maps, there is 2 Soul churches, one on one side, and like we've put in requests to have it removed. But it takes a long time for this information to be updated. Like Google's pretty quick, but then it has to filter to all these other places. And I think one of the things that people forget is there's car navigation systems. There's there's all these different websites, like Foursquare, I think it is, and all these different like random places, TripAdvisor, and all these other kind of different places, and they pull information from Google and stuff. And so you have to think about it like you update Google. Okay, Google's changed, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything else down the road has changed. And so there's so many different areas where your information is or is being accessed. So you just have to make sure that when you make those changes, that it's going to have time for it to kind of feed through. And get to all the different places. So if you are making service updates, be decisive, make that service change and move forward. If it's a one-time thing, okay, use social media, because again, it's not going to be around for very long. Use your network, whether it's WhatsApp chats, small groups, use that to push information, and then have a dedicated page on your website like an Easter or Christmas. But don't update the core piece of information very often, because we want to use that as the database that Google and stuff pull from, and don't want to change it too much.
Yes, 100%. And it's usually easier. It's usually way easier to throw a pop-up banner on your website than it is to change your service times and locations. So yeah, 100%. And then on those Easter landing pages, get fun, get creative, do whatever you want with your branding. Those are the places, because they're come and go. Google's not going to index them to a crazy degree. But then just keep your core website pretty consistent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, We've talked about a lot of different things. I want to just focus a little bit on the future. But I know we're kind of close on time, but I think this is helpful because we talk about these shifts. So like it takes 6 months for information to get out there. So if we're looking at the future of updated websites, we want to be looking 6 months, 2 years down the road. So what trends are you seeing in web design right now that churches should be paying attention to in the next year or two?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what I'm looking at is might be a little bit counterintuitive to what we've been talking about. So we've really been talking about just like core basics for that person who doesn't want to be overwhelmed. But when we're talking about the future and kind of what we see coming down the road, it's a little bit kind of more advanced. And so right now, with the introduction of AI, we see a lot of AI-driven content and AI updates, things like that. And so the ability to kind of keep your website up and running with things like Zapier, just kind of like taking some of that load off of your hands. So when you're updating a social post, it's automatically updating content on your website or something like that. So we're seeing that kind of become more and more of a thing. And that's really cool because it's kind of taking that burden off of that single person at the church. We're also kind of seeing a huge drive and push for a greater level, specifically within the church space, a greater level of rich content. And so when we're talking about what that is like events or blog posts or things that are really relevant to that person who's maybe seeking or searching for Christ. We haven't seen that a whole lot in the church sphere. And that's really, really cool because blog posts and things like that are actually still really impactful for getting really great content to people who weren't even searching for you. So that's a space where blog posts actually thrive in. If somebody just wants to ask a question about who God is, your blog post could be that number one search for them, and then they could be introduced to you without ever even looking for you. And so we're actually trying to really capitalize on some of that because it's such rich information for us to be able to pull kind of new visitors onto your site. And then from an aesthetic standpoint, we're actually seeing a lot of really awesome just micro animations and things that take that branding to the next level. So when you're looking at websites now, they'll kind of be a little bit more dynamic. They'll feel a little bit more lively. And that's just the introduction of kind of these new code bases being able to make really awesome static branding, kind of bring that to life in a really cool way. And so we're kind of excited to kind of hit that turn because I think that's going to be kind of the foundation and basis in the future for what websites look like aesthetically.
Yeah, I think that was exclusively for the big companies before, right? Like if you think about when Apple did a product launch and you go onto the product page and you scroll down and there's all these like scroll influence. I don't, you know the correct term for this, but like as you scroll down, the animation moves with the scroll, and like that was like 6-7 years ago that Apple was doing that. But now you look at things like Webflow and Framer, and a lot of these web builders and content management systems, a lot of them are like bringing this animation side of things in. So I think this is going to be something we see on a lot more websites in the coming years that are actually you don't have to code it in. It can be like done with a website builder that's more kind of like intuitive to use, like Photoshop or Canva, that kind of thing. The best thing you can do right now to keep on top of things is just keep your finger on the pulse of AI. So like go onto YouTube, find some YouTubers that are experts in AI, and just listen to what they have to say, or read some blogs or some articles, or follow people on Instagram, and just find out as much information about what AI is doing. Because one, you can be ahead of what comes out in the news as it breaks, because it's going to be moving a lot, but also you can start to learn some of these systems. Okay, so like how can you use ChatGPT? I'm sure you've been told this by everyone else before, but just keep your finger on the pulse, just see what's coming out. And especially over the next 2 years, I think there's going to be a lot of movement, especially in the website space. So just keep an eye on that, and maybe we'll produce some more content that kind of highlights this in the future. So we're one of those voices that help navigate this with you. Emily, a couple of questions for you. These are quick fire ones.
Okay.
What is your hot take on church websites in 2025?
I say this kind of often within my circle, and it's you wouldn't decorate your church building like you decorate your home. So don't design your website just based on your personal preference. It's just so true. I see people all the time come in and say, well, I don't like the way that this looks, or I don't like that when I'm scrolling. And it's oftentimes we internalize or we become very personal about our digital platforms. When we're not doing that with our church spaces. And that's because you aren't the target audience for your church website. You aren't. You are the person who is behind the scenes, who has been invested in your church for a long period of time. So your website actually isn't meant to serve you. So don't fall into the trap of wanting it to serve you, because then it's not going to entice that new user who doesn't understand who Christ is and doesn't know who your church is. And so we want it to look like your church. We want it to have a culture like your church. We also want it to sound like your church as well, not what you would want, but what that new user would want. That's my hot
That's
take.
a good one. So don't have live, laugh, love at the top of the page.
Please don't do that.
Okay,
please.
That's good to know. Oh, I really like that hot take. That's a good one. Okay, if a church only has time to improve one thing on their site this week, what should it be?
Man, I think I've said it over and over again, but just get those broken things out the door. Just scrub your content. It could be really quick, 5-10 minutes on your most popular pages, and make sure that everything's working, that you don't have old events up that aren't accurate, and that no information is broken or busted, because that's going to be an immediate no from like a lot of users. So when a new person's looking at your site and something's not working, or it doesn't seem like it's truthful or trustworthy, they're not going to want to come to your church, and it's going to take a lot more relational equity to get them through the door. So just make sure that everything's working, dial some things down.
Have your spring clean on your website.
Yes.
Make it happen.
Spring cleaning time for your website.
Now we're post Easter. You can go and do that. Okay, and then finally, since you've been such an amazing guest and you've had so much wisdom to share, I'm sure people would love to find out more information from you in the future. How can people get in touch with you and find out more about what you do and also what your team does at Church Media Squad?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have conversations with anybody who's questioning kind of like what's going on with their website or in their church space or digital space. It truthfully is a passion of mine to make sure that churches are on the forefront of digital tech and not on the back end, which sometimes we can suffer from. And so feel free to just reach out to us at Church Media Squad. Ask for me specifically. Anybody will get you in touch with me. Even just a quick email. I would love to connect at any point in time. And so I will be over there at Church Media Squad, willing to help at any point in time.
Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully you, the listener, have learned something. I've definitely learned something. I've got my own website with my design stuff that I need to go and update now and fix all the broken things. But thank you, Emily, again for joining us. And we'll see you guys on another episode of the Church Circle podcast.